Welcome to our fourth episode of CCBH Chats. And tonight we will be talking about handling the holidays since we're in the Advent season. My name is Anita Ray, and I am the Grants Director for Calvert County Behavioral Health. And I'm pleased to have with us tonight, our guest tonight is Dewana Goodwin. She's a licensed clinical professional counselor. She works here at Calvert County at the health department, and she's one of our outpatient clinicians. So we are going to start tonight. So our subject today, as said earlier, is handling the holidays. We did a little trailer earlier today about handling the holidays in regard to this is a really, really happy time for a lot of people, but sometimes this season is not as happy for others as it is for some. And so Dewana is going to give us some insight tonight about some best practices on how to handle the holidays, the stress. Sometimes it's good stress and sometimes it's not so good stress.
Right.
So, Dewana, can you share with us how do you decide on how to create a meaningful holiday with less stress during the season?
Okay, well, first of all, I will say I'm very happy to be here and just have the opportunity just to share some information with everyone.
Yes.
So, as far as in creating a meaningful holiday and not having it be so stressful. So, one of the things I definitely recommend for anyone I'm working with is that and for myself included, is that you're making sure that you're prioritizing rest. And so, rest can be getting more sleep, like during the night. It could also just be just taking breaks from the busyness of the holidays and that type of thing. So, as far as like creating it to be more meaningful, with any of the holidays, there tends to be this deeper meaning behind it anyway, right? So, a lot of them are religious based.
Mm-hmm.
So, being able to connect with your higher power, whatever that is for you, is a great way to not be so concerned about the hustle and bustle that we're normally concerned with in the holidays, like the shopping and,
Mm-hmm.
now because things are more open, going to parties possibly. But really being able to find out how can I, connect with what's important to me, whether that's, being able to give to others or again, just connecting with your family and friends. But I think you have to be able to individually really think about, what is the importance of the holiday for you?
Yeah, I love that. I do.
Mhm.
I love that being able to connect with what's really important to you. So
Right.
I was thinking about this too while you were talking. Is that so? How do you think you can set boundaries for your mental health?
Okay.
Make it more meaningful. But then how do you really set the boundaries for just your own being to take care of yourself during the
Right.
holidays?
So there's a lot of different ways that we as therapists talk about when it comes to setting boundaries. So there are physical boundaries that we can set. So meaning if there are certain places or maybe even certain people that you're thinking, you know what, this person is not healthy for me to be around.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really have healthy communication, or they're constantly stepping over boundaries. You may decide I can't be around you,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just from my own mental health, for me to feel better and not be as anxious. Or if you don't feel like you can, just take that person out of your life, so to
Yeah.
speak, for the holidays, being able to just limit the time that you're with them. So,
Yeah. How do you do that though, Tawana? I mean, that would be
right.
tough. So
Yeah.
let's say you have someone, and I'm just thinking about holiday parties. So what this leads
Mhm.
into is how do you say no to the things that you
Mhm.
should say no to, and how do you
Mhm.
make room for the things that you should say yes to?
Okay.
So kind of
Yes.
how do you do that though? How do
Right.
you do that?
So I always tell any of my clients, like, if you're not used to setting boundaries, it's going to be difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first of all, so I expect for people to be uncomfortable or to feel like, I really, or feeling like that guilt. A lot of times people
Yeah.
will say if they're going to set a boundary, they feel guilty about it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I always say is that there is a such thing as what we would say is irrational guilt. So meaning it's guilt that there really isn't any um, the feeling is valid because
Yeah.
you're going to feel that way because this may be your family or someone you're close to, but the irrational part of it is that you're not doing it because of the other person, that you're doing because of your own mental health, because you know that it causes you more stress, or it's just like I said, just very abusive or unhealthy relationship, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, it's going to be uncomfortable. You may feel some of that guilt coming up, but I always tell clients that doesn't mean that you don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It just
Mm-hmm.
means that you can get better at it by practicing more, by saying no, by preparing yourself. Because, a lot of times we know that when someone, is unhealthy for us in some way, they have a way of trying to convince us or
Mm-hmm.
having us, trying to make us feel guilty
Yeah.
about certain things. So, with that being said, you can prepare, okay, like, how am I going to respond to this person when they're maybe trying to like convince me? So just having a very blanket statement, like, well, I really don't want to talk about that, or I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. I don't think I really want to do that this year. With the pandemic, I know a lot of people are
COVID is a
not.
good escape, isn't it?
Right, for
Yes,
sure, but
it
it's
is.
real.
It's
But it's a
real, right?
real anxiety that people have.
It
So
is.
right, so that can be another, not excuse, but that's the reason.
Mm-hmm.
And but when you make a statement like that, making it very short and sweet, not
Okay.
giving a lot of explanation. What we also use in therapy is, or what we encourage is what's called the broken record.
Okay.
So basically, like saying the same thing, you might say it in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
but you're just reiterating the same point so that there's no room for them to try to convince you, or you're trying to explain like
Mm-hmm.
why you want to do this. There's no reason for an explanation. It's just, as they say, I've heard this before, like, no is a complete sentence. Like,
Oh yeah, I've never
that's
heard that before. I like
really,
that. I like
yeah, like
that.
you're right. There's no need to have an explanation if that's, your true boundary and you just
I
feeling
like that.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. So because we're so busy during the season, what do you recommend? How do people recharge during this season? Or how do, even if it's not just the season,
Right.
how do you even recharge from having difficult situations that you may be experiencing? What do
Right.
you recommend for how people should recharge?
Okay, so as far as recharging, again, another therapy word that we use a lot is called grounding.
Okay.
And so, grounding, what that has to do with is grounding yourself to the present moment in some way. Okay, and so that could be doing a lot of different things. But one of the ways that we say to do that is by using all of your senses in some way.
Okay.
A very quick thing that I have people do is, number one is you're looking for 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch,
Mhm.
down to taste and smell, right?
Okay.
So being able to use all of your senses in a way where you're concentrating on whatever that sense is, and that's a way for you to ground in the present moment and not be so caught up in whatever, the anxiety that's going on in our head, or just feeling sad, depressed, whatever it is. It's a way to like let you know, okay, I'm good, I'm safe, I'm alive, I'm well.
How would you, okay, can you, I mean, Tawana, do you mind giving us an example of how you could do? I love that. I've never even heard
Okay.
that before. Like
Yeah.
you use the 5 senses,
Right.
but
So
then
yeah.
you do what? So you would do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But how would you do? What
Exactly.
would you give me an example of that?
Right.
What would
So
that
so
be?
you would say, okay, starting off with 5 things that you can see. So I see this nice sweater that you're wearing. I see these, L's on the shelf. So
Yeah.
5 things. So just going down the list. My
Okay.
water bottle. Then 4 things that I can touch. So actually physically, feeling the water bottle, like
Okay.
feeling the temperature that it is. So you're really focusing and honing in on all of that sense. Can I smell something? Do I hear something? Right?
Okay.
Like, so really just paying attention to all of that. So, because when you're doing that, your mind, like I said, is not so concentrated on what you may be anxious about,
Okay.
or, again, sadness, grief, or whatever it is. But it's really just like, okay, I'm grounding. I'm making sure that I'm good in that
Okay.
moment.
That is a wonderful concept, though.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's really helpful too, because one of the things that I've been thinking about during this whole entire time since the COVID-19, um, a lot of people have lost loved ones,
For sure.
and this may be the first holiday season they've been without their loved ones, whether it was in 2020 and now we're in 2021.
Right.
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 And this has gone on a lot longer than we ever anticipated.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, and I would share this, and I think I may have shared this when you and I spoke before, is that I lost my brother to COVID in 2020. And so this is the first, and he was my oldest brother, and he was only maybe maybe a little bit less than 2 years older than me.
Wow.
And so it really just changed my whole thought process about a whole lot of different
I'm
things.
sure.
Um, and I took his loss as a different part of my life than maybe some other people take loss of loved ones. So I was thinking, when people are going through loss during the holidays and they're grieving,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that would be helpful, or
Right.
um, even support networks that could be helpful to people during this time frame?
Right. Well, so number one, I would say that grief can be related to anything. I don't think that people recognize that it's related to any loss that you might be
Yes.
experiencing, right? So it may not just be about, loss of a loved one, in passing away, but it could be any loss that you're facing
Yeah.
at any time. So I will say that. So when you're experiencing any type of grief, first you want to make sure that you are able to express how you feel, right? So I tell people there's no right or wrong way when it comes to grieving, because we have so many different emotions that
Yes.
come up when you're going through that grief process. So whatever it is that you're feeling, it's about expressing that. As far as support networks, I mean, I know that hospice has a lot of their own support groups that they have for particular ways that we can lose loved ones, and so you have a group of people in that situation where they can relate
Yes.
to everything that you're experiencing. So I think that that is very helpful. A lot of times family members may not be the one to go to, because they may not be comfortable even talking about it, or they
Yeah.
would rather much avoid it. So if you can find some support, like I said, the hospice support groups, where people are comfortable enough to talk about it, but certainly a therapist, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the one thing I would say is being able to be in that kind of a safe space where you're free to share whatever emotion it is, because
Yeah.
sometimes we judge ourselves about whatever emotion comes up, whether it's anger or whatever it is, or guilt.
Yes.
We want to make sure that we can express all of that. So that's one thing. Then another way, as far as the holidays specifically, making sure that you still recognize that that relationship is still there, even though that person may not physically be with you,
Yeah.
that you can still have that relationship, still honor that relationship in some way. So
Yeah.
a great thing with the holidays, I recommend different traditions that maybe that person really enjoyed, to share with the family, like
Yes.
making it your own thing and saying, hey, I know that grandma loved this recipe, I want to share it with you all, do it together as a family. And just sharing those positive memories. I think sometimes we don't want to talk about it because we may not want to be sad or anything like that. But
Yeah.
I think just being able to share that,
Yeah.
again, especially during a time like the holidays when you want to celebrate, you want it to be joyous, that can be a way to include them, because
Yeah.
again, they're still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you brought up a point about loss and grief. It doesn't
Okay.
necessarily have to be a loved one.
Right.
Even during COVID, people lost things or stopped doing things that they normally did.
Right.
I think about a lot of times about the people that actually, the Olympians. I think about them all the time. They had to
Okay.
hold on for another year
Okay.
before they
Yeah.
could
Right.
actually compete. And
Mhm.
I read some stories where people said, well, you know what? Some people lost loved ones. I couldn't train the way I wanted to train. Some people said I
Okay.
couldn't see my grandmother like I wanted to see my grandmother, or they couldn't
Right.
see, they couldn't go see their parents like they wanted to. And you
Right.
see all these reunions, but that was loss that people experienced during COVID. And
Right.
so I think it's
Exactly.
important to know that it could be a loss of a loved one, but it could be loss of an experience or a
Right.
connection, because the connection
Yes.
for a lot of people has been broken during this time frame.
For sure.
And what are some of the most helpful things, like you say, reconnecting with people when it comes to a broken connection on a lot of things that people have experienced during this time.
For
Um,
sure. Yeah.
so, so will you be willing to share with us as and our audience out here, Duana, kind of how do you handle all the competing priorities when it
Yeah.
comes to the holiday?
Well, like I said, I try as much as possible to practice what I preach.
Okay.
So I definitely am making sure rest is
Mm-hmm.
a part of that.
Yep.
So if I need to delegate some things, like if I feel like I'm getting more overwhelmed, Or to be honest, like if I say, you know what, I'm not going to do that,
Mm-hmm.
just because I have so many other things on my plate.
Mm-hmm.
So I have gotten better with saying no to things that maybe before I might have felt guilty about saying no. Because, like I said, it's a practice.
It is.
And so just being able to do that. Also, you know, as I shared as well, like recognizing again what's more important for me. Like I'm not a fan of shopping.
Okay.
I know a lot of people enjoy that. I mean, that's a big thing during the holidays,
Yes.
but I don't like to shop.
Yes.
So I'm doing gift cards, you know, I might do a little bit of online shopping, but that's not going to be like the main focus of my holiday.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, I like looking at the lights or, you know, watching holiday movies. Like that's more my lane.
Yes.
So I stick with that. I stick more with the things that I know are enjoyable to me and again that are meaningful for me when it comes to the holidays. So, but definitely the rest.
Yeah.
Making sure I'm not overloading myself.
That's awesome. So we would like to thank Tawana tonight for spending time with us on how to handle the holidays. But we would like to share if you are experiencing any issues or in need of any services, please contact us at Recovery Rapid Response. Our hotline number is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and our number is 1-877-467-5628. And we'll see you next month. And next month's topic is New Year, New Me. Thank you.